tax dollars are dedicated to the state's economic development group. Well, now the governor and his jobs chief say they need more, millions more. Some lawmakers question how that money is spent, though. Let's go to Fox 13's investigative reporter Tina Jensen, who did some digging and is here to tell us what you found. What did you find?
Well, Mark, I discovered our new Secretary of Commerce, who spent the last few months telling lawmakers that Enterprise Florida is in desperate need of more funding, spent the same amount of time racking up thousands in pricey hotels and fancy dinners with staffers. There was also a $6,000 charge for custom office furniture, paid for with your tax dollars until we started asking questions.
Florida has alluring beaches, no state income tax, and a big pot of money used by Enterprise Florida to lure companies to bring jobs to the Sunshine State.
As I'm told, okay, by the people that actually keep the ledger for us, is not sufficient to really work on all the transactions we have in the queue today.
That's Bill Johnson, Florida's Secretary of Commerce and Enterprise Florida's president.
I need $47 million.
He's warning lawmakers the Jobs Incentives Fund is running dry.
Cash is king, and I can only deal with the amount of money that I'm told that I have available. And I wish, obviously, it was a different number, but the number isn't as large as I would like it to be.
In June, lawmakers put $43 million in the incentives fund. Johnson then asked for another $85 million in September. And Governor Scott is now proposing a multi-year plan for $250 million for the Enterprise Florida Incentives Fund. But if Enterprise Florida is feeling the pinch anywhere, it's not in its own operating fund. EFI is a public-private partnership created by the state back in the 90s. Half the operating funds were supposed to come from the private sector. But right now, taxpayers kick in more than 90%. We found a lot of the private money seems to go to expenses that wouldn't pass muster in government.
All those in favor?
In August, EFI's board authorized $765,000 in bonuses for Enterprise employees. Only private dollars were used for that staff bonus pool, which included a $50,000 bonus for Johnson after 6 months on the job. That's on top of his $265,000 state-funded base salary. Our investigation also found that Johnson was reimbursed for pricey dinners and hotel stays over the summer. Among the findings, there were multiple dinners with employees expensed as working dinners. One of them was in May at Eddie V's Prime Seafood here in Johnson and 2 other Enterprise employees spent $359 while discussing area politics and strategy. The same month, Johnson had dinner at Miami's Red the Steakhouse with his former colleague from his job at Florida Ports. The tab reached $374 as they talked about strategy development, also paid for by Enterprise. The Governor's Club in Tallahassee got another chunk of the funds. More than $1,000 in expenses were charged on Johnson's EFI credit card for membership dues, meals, and drinks at the private club from May to September. There were pricey hotel stays, too. $378 for one night at the W Hotel in San Francisco, $500 for a night at the JW Marriott in New York City.
They complain about not getting money.
State Representative Dwight Dudley of St. Petersburg doesn't like it.
How about spending wisely the money that you are allowed to have in the legitimate pursuit of creating jobs, of getting companies to come here to create jobs?
Enterprise Florida spokesman repeatedly told me Johnson's charges are paid for with the private portion of its funding.
They are defending these expenses now as saying that they're coming from their corporate donations. They're not using state funds to pay for these kinds of dinners, these kinds of trips. So should taxpayers care?
Here is a quasi-governmental agency that is asking the legislature every year for tens of millions of more dollars.
Mark Frullo is with the liberal government watchdog group Progress Florida, which has long been critical of EFI.
The vast majority of their budget is coming from Floridians, everyday working families.
He says if Enterprise Florida can't hold the line on privately paid expenses, why should taxpayers be asked to pay even more?
Now, after seeing this information you've provided about their expense reports, it makes one wonder if, at least for some people, it's just seen as sort of a slush fund.
Not all all of the charges were paid for by private dollars. In a review of 3 months of Johnson's expenses, we found an order for custom-made furniture paid for with state money, 4 lounge chairs for his office totaling $6,662. So we did some more digging and discovered the charge was canceled just a couple days after we asked for copies of Johnson's expenses. EFI now says the order was made in error, and the money was returned to the state-funded ledger.
Talking about chairs that cost $6,000, but their derrieres are so special they can't have regular office chairs. That just seems completely wrong.
EFI's chairman, Governor Rick Scott, didn't respond to an interview request, but he's been busy promoting the $250 million EFI funding proposal.
If we don't do this, it's a big mistake for our kids.
Johnson didn't want to talk about the chairs either, though in the past he said he's willing to be accountable to taxpayers.
I'm not asking for the legislature to, give us a carte blanche. We need to be held accountable to the taxpayers of this state, and I'm happy to do that.
And you may have noticed on the expense reports, it says there's a per diem dinner limit of $35 per dinner. That's state statute, but EFI tells me that their Secretary of Commerce doesn't have to follow that rule since they reimburse him with that small percentage of their funding that comes from private dollars.
Tina, any idea whether or not there are more expenses like this? It looks like you found a lot already.
There could be. I only looked at expenses from over the summer. I also asked for his expense reports for his first 2 months in office, March and April, and we're still waiting for those, but we'll let you know what we